Hello and welcome to the Pig Edge, Teagasc Pig podcast with me, Kieran Carroll, with all the latest news and insights on pig production. On this month's episode, you're going to hear an interview that Catherine Egan from the Beef Edge did recently with Gerard McCutcheon and Mark Plunkett on how using pig slurry can save farmers money. Gerard and Mark have some really interesting points to make about the value and use of pig slurry, as well as some of the more efficient spreading methods. These are very relevant to pig producers, as well as grass and tillage farmers, and are well worth a listen. And Catherine first asked Gerard how much pig slurry is available and how much is it worth.
In Ireland, let's say if we take the number of sows that are in the country on a national basis, there are about 148,000 sows. And if we assume that each sow plus her progeny is producing about 3 to 3,500 gallons, or about 15 to 16 cubic meters per sow per year, that works out at about 2.2 million cubic meters, or very close to 500 million gallons of pig slurry produced on the larger Irish pig farms in Ireland. And what I mean by the larger Irish pig farms is that I'm not factoring in the small holdings with one or two sows that may have a pig identification number, but they wouldn't be deemed or seen as commercially sort of large pig farms as such. So about 500 million gallons of pig slurry is available throughout the country. And the current value on each 1,000 gallons of pig slurry is 48 euros for the nutrient value that's in 1,000 gallons of pig slurry. So that's, let's say, a lot of slurry with a potential value of over 20 million euros worth of fertiliser, if you were to put it another way.
There really is considerable value in spreading pig slurry this year, then, Gerard. How many pig farmers are there in the country?
When we talk about the larger operations, we're talking about farms with more than 20 sows and more than 100 finishing pigs. And there are about 280 to 300 such farms scattered throughout the country. We all know that the concentration would be largely around Cavan and in Cork. But there's good scattering of pig farms throughout the country. And you may be lucky enough to have one beside you that could be a cheap source of a fertiliser, let's say, in this current year.
Gerard, you've mentioned that 1,000 gallons of pig slurry is worth 48 euro. What is the chemical fertiliser equivalent?
When we look at the nutrient value of it, it's probably the equivalent of a 50 kilo bag of 19,720. And really, let's say, in normal times, we would value that at about 24 to 25 euros per 1,000 gallons. But we all know fertiliser prices have gone sky high. And at this stage, that value, that bag of 19,720 is worth 48 euros per bag or per 1,000 gallons of pig slurry.
And do you think, Gerard, that there is scope for beef farmers in Ireland to use pig manure or other organic fertilisers to save money?
Yes, I do believe, Catherine, that there is great scope for beef farmers to use it. Use pig slurry, or, as you say, other organic fertilizers that may be available. Perhaps a dairy farmer may be in a derogation and they may take cattle slurry from him, or there may be poultry manure available. And really, you're looking at the nutrient value that these products can bring to your farm. And so if you are using them, you need to concentrate and say, okay, what can I do to reduce the amount of chemical fertilizer that I'm going to use? Because if you don't do that, you're not going to save yourself money. So it is a question of looking at the value of what you're bringing in, whether it's pig manure or other organic fertilizer, and reducing the amount of chemical fertilizer that you may use accordingly. And really, one of the big costs on beef farms is fertilizer costs, and it is worth looking at in this current year.
Most definitely. And for beef farmers listening in, how do they go about beginning the process of using slurry from pig farms to reduce their fertilizer costs?
Really, I suppose they need to see, is there an organic fertilizer source available to them in the locality? If there is, then they need to sit down and see, well, is it possible to actually get access to that source of slurry or organic fertilizer? And really, the one point I'd make, and it's very important, you're producing this podcast early in the year, but it's important for farmers to actually plan ahead and look at what level of fertiliser they are going to use this year, and can they replace some of that with some organic fertiliser that will be a lot cheaper than the current fertiliser prices that are going at the moment. The reason I say they need to do that is because you need to look at the calculation to comply with the nitrates regulations. And the system of calculation was changed back in 2017, whereby you would look at your organic stocking rate from last year, and you would also look at the usage of concentrate feed that you used last year. So you're not trying to do a calculation with a moving goalpost now. You're looking at what you did last year, and you're basing your fertilizer plan for this year on those figures. So you can calculate what level of organic nitrogen stocking rate you have on your farm. That will determine how much pig slurry or other organic fertilizer you can import to ensure that you don't exceed the 170 kilos organic nitrogen threshold. And then you need to do the second part of the calculation, which is looking at the phosphorus side of things. And without overcomplicating it, I think it is very important that each farmer would sit down with their advisor or agri-consultant and get them to do the calculation, so that they know if they go to a pig farmer or anybody else in the locality looking for fertilizer, that they can actually factor that into their calculations for the forthcoming year. And
it's really important, Gerard, to do this calculation early on in the year.
It is, and I would say, you know, I was working for a pig farmer last year, and we just did a calculation for one person who was looking at what could he import this year. But when we looked at, he had, let's say, 100 acres or 40 hectares of grassland, and his organic nitrogen stocking rate was 105 kilos organic nitrogen per hectare. When we looked at the amount of pig slurry he could take in 500 cubic meters of pig slurry, or over 100,000 gallons of pig slurry. But then when we put in the amount of, he used 8 tons of 18612 fertilizer. When we factored that in, we saw that he couldn't actually use any pig slurry. So that's the point, really, Catherine. It's important that you do the calculation. Now, we were doing that calculation last year at the end of the year. He knows this year, let's say if he wants to import pig manure, then he can, let's say, ensure that he doesn't use any 18612. He can get the equivalent of that from the pig slurry at a much cheaper cost, obviously, because, let's say, you know, the fertilizer is so costly at the moment. And let's say, you know, he can do that, comply with the nitrates regulations, and save himself money.
Most definitely, Gerard. And you touched there on the value of the slurry being worth 23 million in the country. But is there a cost for farmers in using pig slurry?
Yes, I suppose a lot of farmers would find it's much easier to go down to the local co-op, buy your chemical fertilizer, spread it, and let's say that's the job done. With pig slurry, you have a time component, and you have a transport and spreading component. So there is a cost associated with that, and you know it'd be wrong for us to discount that. If the pig farm is close by, that cost obviously is going to be a lot lower than if the pig farm is a good distance away. So you have to factor that into your calculation. But given fertilizer prices are so high at the moment, it is a good time to actually sit down and see could you gain value from using locally produced organic fertilizers.
That's great. Thanks, Gerard. I suppose moving to the application of the pig slurry that you've touched on, Mark, maybe you could outline what are the benefits of using the low emission slurry spreading equipment or less equipment, or what's the benefit of using this above spreading organic fertilizer such as pig slurry?
Yes, Catherine, the low emission slurry spreading technology, I suppose firstly it delivers the slurry in a narrow bands, which reduces its surface area, and this reduces the ammonia or the nitrogen loss during and after application, and improves the recovery of nitrogen from the slurry, thus reducing our requirement for chemical or bag fertilizer. It also allows a very even distribution of the nutrients across the spread width, which ensures the more targeted delivery of the nutrients to where they'll be maximised, especially the nitrogen part of the slurry, Catherine. It also reduces the odours and the smells at time of application. So it's a very, environmentally friendly, user-friendly technology in terms of the environment. It also allows the application into higher grass covers and the faster return of grazing animals to the grazing fields. And I suppose a big benefit is there, it allows the application of slurry at times when soil conditions are better and reduces the risk of soil compaction.
A lot of benefits there, Mark, and really looking at how much extra fertiliser value with a band spreader would give you above maybe a conventional splash plate.
Well, if we take the low emission slurry spreading technology, either the trailing shoe or the band spreader, Catherine, we're looking at a 35% improvement in nitrogen recovery in the springtime and a 65% improvement in nitrogen recovery in the summertime. So really changing the method and the timing of slurry application, from splash plate to trailing shoe, and from summer to spring, we can recover a lot more of that nitrogen that's in the slurry and grow more grass or more crops with that nitrogen at lower cost.
That's great, Mark. And I suppose Gerard has highlighted there the importance of pig slurry, and which fields on the farm will benefit most from an application of pig slurry?
Well, again, it's very much down to the nutrient profile of the pig slurry. It has an excellent nutrient profile. It's a very good balance of NPK. As Gerard has told us there, it contains 19 units of nitrogen, 7 units of phosphorus, and 20 units of potassium. So it's I suppose it's a multifunctional organic fertilizer source. And what I mean by that is that you can put it on your grazing ground as it's a very well balanced fertilizer, say at somewhere in the region of maybe 1,500 gallons per acre, or on the silage ground at 3,000 gallons per acre, and it will supply 70% of the nitrogen requirement, all of the P requirements, and 80% of the K requirements for that silage crop. So it's a very valuable source of NP and K, and as I say, can be used on both grazing areas and silage areas on the farm, Catherine.
Most definitely, Mark. And I suppose when you look at when farmers that are spreading slurry, many of them talk about soils requiring lime, where a lot of slurry has been spread. Can you explain why this would be the case?
Well, it's very much to do with the form of nitrogen in slurries, whether it's pig slurry or cattle slurry. It's an ammonium form of nitrogen, and when it converts to ammonium, in that conversion or that hydrolysis, it releases hydrogen, and it can increase in soil acidity. But recent research from Johnstown Castle on urea fertilizers, which is the same form of nitrogen, indicate that the lowering of the pH is not as large as expected. And I would suggest the same can be applied for our slurries. So what I would say, Catherine, we test our soils every 4 or 5 years, and we apply lime based on the soil test.
Mark, a lot of farmers spread lime last autumn and are starting to spread lime this spring. How soon after spreading lime should a farmer spread slurry on grass?
Well, ideally we say 3 months, but if we say spread slurry, say last October, November, again, it'd be well washed in over the winter period. So, you'd have no problem coming back in with cattle slurry, over the coming weeks and months on those fields. Like, I suppose, where lime is planned, the alternative is that you spread the pig slurry first and then you spread your lime 10 days later.
That's great, Mark. It's definitely something to consider for farmers, particularly this year.
I think so, Catherine. I think with the price of fertilizer, especially nitrogen, has tripled in price. P's and K's have doubled. If you can source, pig slurry, it will definitely help cushion the impact of high fertilizer prices in the current year.
Thanks very much, Mark and Gerard, for joining me on the show.
Thanks, Catherine,
for having us.
That's all for this episode of The Pig Edge, and my thanks to Catherine Egan from The Beef Edge for allowing us to feature her recent interview with Gerard McCutcheon and Mark Plunkett. Don't forget to tune in to The Pig Edge for all your pig production news. And rate, review and follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss a show. And for more information, go to teagasc.ie. I'm Kieran Carl and thanks for listening.